Welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to our friends from Miami-Dade and all across the state of Florida. And to those across the United States, from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, including Kansas, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, Delaware, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nebraska, North Carolina, Colorado, and Missouri. And to our international friends in Mexico, the UK, Italy, Ecuador, Ireland, Canada, Nigeria, etc. I'm Kyle Siebrecht, Executive Director of Strength in Numbers, Power in Connection. Statistics show that if you are not a victim of a domestic violence, someone close to you probably is. This webinar is for all of us, survivors and family members and friends of victims. It is valuable to know the process. If you are not in Miami-Dade, the process will very likely be similar where you are. Check with your local authorities and service providers. Even if you may not be in danger, a friend or a family member may be, and you will have the information needed when the time comes. Our first panelist, Detective Malia Carson, is from the Domestic Crimes Unit, Miami-Dade Police Department. She will tell us what happens when the police come to your residence in response to an emergency call to 911. Second on the program is Yvonne Mesa, Bureau Chief, Violence and Prevention Division Director, Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, Miami-Dade County. She will tell us about how to report after the crime and all about Miami-Dade shelters, as well as what types of assistance are available to victims. Then Daryl Ambrosini, Chief of the Misdemeanor Domestic Violence Unit at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, will speak about the legal process and legal assistance available to victims. Finally, Sandra L. Brown, MA, CEO of the Institute for Relational Harm Reduction and Public Pathology Education, will speak on healing from the trauma of domestic abuse. Then there will be a general Q&A session when you may address any of the speakers. For questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and please make sure to address the speaker at the beginning of your question. The panelists may answer you privately during the event, or we will read your question aloud during the Q&A so you can remain anonymous. We will prioritize the questions that are relevant to the most people. If you wish, you may submit your question in Spanish. This program is being recorded. This presentation is intended for those 18 years of age or older, and speakers will give a trigger warning as appropriate. Now, let's begin the program with Detective Malia Carson from the Domestic Crimes Unit, Miami-Dade Police Department.
Women are more commonly victims. However, both can experience domestic violence and abuse. Only half of domestic violence incidents are reported. Reporting domestic violence is a main thing that we need to get to, and it is one way that we can eradicate this domestic issue. Whether you need to speak up on your own behalf or call on behalf of a loved one, reporting domestic violence is the first step to breaking its power. So when you call or to report domestic violence, you call 911. It's crucial to call 911 report any domestic violence abuse, such as describe the abuser, the location, the incident which took place, your location, any injuries or medical needs that you may have. Once all of that information is reported in detail, law enforcement will respond to your area or your location. It is the duty of the law enforcement to respond and provide services when they get there. The law enforcement officer, the original officer on preliminary investigation, in detail, they're going to ask you some very personal questions to determine what exactly occurred. They'll collect and document all evidence. They'll look for witnesses that may have knowledge or have seen what occurred. They'll ask you in detail how you got the injuries. They may ask you to photograph those injuries. They also may ask you to give some type of sworn statement as to in detail what occurred. They'll find out if you have any needs or any services they can provide on scene that can assist you with the issue. We have victim advocates that you can be referred to assist you in finding a shelter, calling a family member, getting you to move that night. We have victim advocates with the Special Victims Bureau in Miami-Dade County Police Department that can pick you up, help you go to a friend's house or a shelter, help you come up with a plan. Also, they'll document the incident in detail so they can be further investigated with detectives with the Miami-Dade Police Department. One of the tools that we use is getting a domestic violence injunction. An injunction would be a document that you would obtain from the courts, and it could, using the police report that was written or the detailed information that you did receive, explaining in detail to be presented to the judge as to what occurred. There's a level of protection against the abuser. And it would require the abuser to not have any contact with you. It can protect you. And also it gives the law enforcement a tool. So if that abuser comes within so many feet of you and you call 911 to report that incident, that person can be arrested right then and there. Also, there is such thing called a stay-away order, which is also issued by the judge. There's a difference between a stay-away order and a domestic violence injunction. A stay-away order, or no contact order, sometimes referred to, comes as a result of a pending criminal charge, and is put in place by the judge in your criminal case. So that will remain until that case is closed. But a domestic violence injunction would be given it would be issued indefinite or a term date. So those are some of the things that you can expect when calling 911. Calling 911 and getting the services that we provide, especially in Miami-Dade County. The main thing is to report. If you know of any abuse or you're experiencing any abuse, report it. If you have a friend or you know someone that is being abused, you can call, try to report that. But in all actuality, law enforcement, we would need to speak to that victim to get to the bottom and get in detail what is exactly occurring. Those are some of the ways that we can help in Miami-Dade County and some of the services that we offer. And that's all I have.
Next, we welcome Yvonne Mesa from CVAC, the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, Miami-Dade.
Thank you so very much. I'm here. Thank you so very much for this wonderful opportunity. I do have to apologize for having to be in transit, but unfortunately something has come up very important that I couldn't avoid this trip. But again, it's a wonderful opportunity to be here with you guys and to share my knowledge and my expertise on this subject matter. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and I wanted to clarify something before that was talked about the definition of domestic violence. And I wanted to let you all know that we work with two different definitions. One is the legal definition, which was the one that was eloquently explained by the detective. But I also wanted to touch upon the social definition of domestic violence, which does not have to do with crimes, but it has to do with behavior. Often, when you're speaking to a victim, the victim may not really know if an assault took place, if a battery took place, because they really don't know the terminology. But they can tell you that I feel that I cannot make a decision. They can tell you, I feel that I have no access to money. They can tell you a lot of things that may not constitute a crime. However, they still make that individual be a victim of domestic violence. So I think it's very important for all of us to understand that. I also wanted to further clarify that if you need to obtain a protective order, you do not need to have a police report. If you do have it, we will use it, and it'll be welcome into the petition. But if you don't have a police report, it's not necessarily to have a police report. So going back to the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, here in Miami, we have the privilege of having the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, which is what is normally known in the country as following the model of a Family Justice Center, which really it's a one-stop center. So in the one-stop center that we have in Miami-Dade County, we currently have VA partners. We have looked around what the needs are for victims, and those are the partners that we have invited to come to our center. So we have, for example, partners, you could do an injunction for protection. You could get food for your family. You could get rental assistance. You could get relocation assistance. You could get individual and group therapy. And the list goes on and on and on. So needless to say, there is beauty in this concept, because when you're a victim of domestic violence, you do not want to have to go to 5 places, 7 places, 10 places, and spend gas, time, miss work, pay for childcare. So the idea with the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center is that once the victim comes in, we assess her case. Number 1, we do a need assessment. And number 2, we do a danger assessment. And number 3, we put together a plan of action so that we know what the victim needs, and so that we pair that victim with whichever services are needed for her at the time. So this approach is called, it's basically refers to a coordinated community response to domestic experiencing a battery or experiencing this. She may not think of her financial situation, or she may not really have at that time the state of mind to think about how can I improve myself? How do I find a job? So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take a look at all her or his needs, and we're trying to, one at a time, be able to provide assistance to that individual. We also have in our division, we have a division, CVAC, as we call it, because the name is very long, Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. It's one of the many programs that we have in the division that I oversee, which is called the Violence Prevention and Intervention Division. So this division, as you mentioned briefly, also has shelters. And so I want to talk a little bit about the shelters in Miami-Dade County. We currently have 3 shelters. They're called Safe Space North, Safe Space South, and Safe Space Central. And I'm happy to announce that effective sometime in December, we will be open the 4th shelter, which is going to be called Safe Space Empowerment Center. So obviously with COVID-19, going into a shelter may be a very frightening experience for basically not only for the victims coming to shelter, but it's also being a challenging experience for the staff working in the shelter. So I want to just let you all know that we have taken all of that, all of the precautions. We have looked at creating hand sanitizing stations for the shelter. We have changed schedules. For example, before we used to have the kitchen open at certain times, and all of the victims would come at that time, and they would just sit there and cook together and socialize. Since then, we have implemented a schedule so that there's only a family at a time in the kitchen. But we also purchase microwaves and televisions, and we place them in the rooms, in the individual rooms, so that they don't necessarily have to go into the area where they used to go to watch TV. So we have a lot of equipment So we have no scarcity of masks, hand sanitizer, wipes. So we're constantly providing our clients with those very, very much needed items at this time. We also take the temperature before a victim comes into the shelter. We take that person's temperature. We have been very extremely fortunate in Miami-Dade County that during the pandemic, we've only had one positive case, which we immediately addressed. And we basically removed that family from the shelter. And we were able to place her in a hotel with all that she needed and all the accommodations. And once she tested positive, we brought her back into the shelter, for which she's very, very grateful. So basically, when we talk about shelter, we're talking about a place where a victim is going to be. Normally, when you talk about emergency shelter in the country, we're talking about approximately 2 months of a stay. However, due to COVID-19, that stay has been very much extended. We have victims that have been in shelter since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're not asking them to leave unless we have alternative housing secure for them, which is what normally happens most of the time. So we also have within the division, not only we have emergency shelter, but we have something that is called transitional housing programs. We have a transitional housing program in the South, and we have a transitional housing program in the North. And through this program, we're able to place our clients in a more long-term placement, because now when you talk about transitional housing, now we're talking about approximately 2 years of a stay. So victims basically, normally, the way that sequence occurs is that victims come through the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, which is our outreach arm. It is an outreach, our outreach component. And through there, once any of these services that I mentioned before, whether emergency shelter or transitional housing, we immediately make those services part of the plan. But again, as I mentioned before, in the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, we have a total of 38 services that we provide. Again, from food to legal services to immigration services, and the list goes on. So while they are in shelter and while they are in transitional program, they have access to all of these services that I explained before. So the idea is that at any given time, no matter where the victim comes through, meaning what program the victim comes through, the victim is going to have access to the same services. We also have something that we call the domestic violence intake units, which are small units of advocacy services that we have at each location in Miami-Dade County. These small advocacy units are comprised by advocates that are there to provide safety planning, provide referrals, injunction protections assistance, and in many instances, the services that they may need may be actually available at the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. So these units are definitely act as a liaison between those vicinities and the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. So the idea, for example, is to assist our victims in whichever they may need. We have a very robust relocations program, which allows us to provide a relocation check to victims of domestic violence. It could fluctuate from $700 to $5,000. It depends on the needs. It depends on the mortgage or rent that victim can afford. But we have these programs available, and we do provide a lot of assistance when it comes to rental assistance. We also provide food for the clients. We have the privilege of having the Department of DCF, the Department of Children and Family, is part of our center. So when victims do speak of any financial needs, we always send them to speak to the DCF expert for them to file for public benefits, including food stamps, cash assistance. So all of that happens within the same roof. So we are very fortunate that we have this unit of services that by just going into one place, you can access all of these different services without having to go, like it used to be in Miami-Dade County before we had the one-stop center, where victims had to go to so many places to obtain the services that they needed. So basically, in Miami-Dade County, I think that we have conquered the item of how to place victims safely in the shelter, because again, during this pandemic, only one victim has been positive, and so we're very, very happy about that. But we're very vigilant about all the protocols, not only at the shelters, but also at CVAC. We have changed the waiting room. We also implemented hand sanitization also at CVAC. And needless to say, you know, we do use the PPE and so on and so forth. But so overall, we feel that you could be in this pandemic and still have access to safety, still have access to services. Just last month, actually the beginning of this month, we launched 2 domestic violence awareness campaigns. One was with the Women's Fund, which is an extraordinary organization that we have the privilege of having in Miami-Dade County. We work very closely with them, and they have placed posters, banners, and they have really done a wonderful job in creating all these flyers and all these advertisements that they have created. Equally, we also engage into another domestic violence awareness campaign with our wonderful state attorney, Kathy Fernando Rando. And through that particular partnership, we did pretty much the same. We created a new brochure, a new flyer. We did it in Creole, Spanish, and English. And we have placed it in many, many different locations. It's really a digital campaign as much as it is a paper campaign. So we have posters that we have been distributing to anybody who have asked us to send them to. So overall, we're trying to make a very, very conscientious effort to make sure that if you're a victim of domestic violence, that you would know that yes, it's a very difficult time, but you do not need to stay at home and put up with the abuse and risk your life and the life of your children. That in Miami-Dade County, we have help. We have amazing leadership here in Miami-Dade County, and one of them is our extraordinary administrative judge of the Domestic Violence Division, Judge Carol Kelly, that has taken a tremendous amount of leadership in moving everything that needed to be done to have access, to have victims of domestic violence have access to injunctions for protection. We have a collaboration with the courts by which at the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, we have purchased iPads and we have them set up with Zoom so that any victim who may need access to a hearing or anything of that nature, that they could come into the center and we set them up in a secure room and they're able to participate in their hearings and they're able to, again, do whatever they need to do via virtual. So here in Miami-Dade County, again, all the pieces have come together. We all have gotten together and we are aware of the challenges. And because we know the challenges, we are responding to the challenges with solutions. So I feel that we have, right now we're almost full to capacity. So that tells me that all the work that we have done has really been very beneficial, because at the beginning of the pandemic, for at least the first 2 months of the pandemic, we had a very significant decrease in the number of victims coming forward, asking for shelter, asking for injunctions for protections. It was a huge decrease. But after we implemented these 2 awareness campaigns, I have to tell you that completely changed. And now again, we're almost full to capacity. We do have the availability of, if we're full to capacity, depending upon the situation of the case, we may be able to place that individual in a hotel until a bed becomes available. So in our division, the amount of services that we have is really huge. When I compare our jurisdiction to many other jurisdictions where I've had the opportunity to visit, I see that again, due to all the leadership that we've had here in Miami-Dade County, we have been able to really make important changes, and we have been able to do a lot for this population.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Yvonne, just one question. What happens with children? Do they go to the shelter with the mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do.
We do take children in our shelters. We are very, very strong in not separating the family. So every family that comes into not only the emergency shelter, but also the transition housing program, they come in with their children and we provide for them and for their children as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll have more questions in the Q&A.
Absolutely.
All righty. Proud of Miami and proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
All righty. I would like now to introduce Daryl Ambrosini. Chief of the Misdemeanor Domestic Violence Unit at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Kyle. So as Kyle said, I am the Misdemeanor Domestic Violence Chief for the State Attorney's Office here in Miami, and I have a little PowerPoint that I'm going to use to assist my presentation here today. All right, so I'm going to explain how after arrest, I know the detective spoke about the arrest for a criminal. I'm going to explain what is criminal, what is non-criminal, and then all of the steps once it is in the criminal system. So I know Yvonne and the officer both mentioned the domestic violence definition, but here's just an easy layout to explain what is criminal behavior and what is non-criminal behavior. Domestic violence isn't always violent, and it's good to understand what is criminal and what is not, so you best guide your call with police. It is always best to call 911 if you believe you are in danger, whether it amounts to a criminal violation or not. So criminal behavior includes, but is not limited to, uninvited physical contact, such as striking, kicking, biting, sexual coercion, abuse, marital rape, intimidation by stalking, computer hacking, and false imprisonment. Note that I did not mention injury as a necessity for a criminal charge. At its bare bones, misdemeanor domestic violence, misdemeanor battery is just the intentional touch or strike against someone else. It does not have to have an injury for it to be criminal. Non-criminal behavior would include, but is not limited to, being denied access to friends or other social contacts, shadowing or restricting the use of a telephone by securing phones in a locked or temporary removal during the time the abuser is away, and denying access to family finances. While these are not criminal, it is still important to reach out and get services to discuss what is the best way to go about this relationship to get out and break out of the cycle of violence. So in Miami-Dade County, we've recognized that domestic violence is a great issue in this area. And there's been an administrative order years ago that created a separate domestic violence court. As Yvonne referenced, Judge Carol Kelly is the administrative judge of our domestic violence unit here in Miami-Dade County, our misdemeanor unit. I'm going to explain the benefits of having that separate domestic violence court. It's also where the misdemeanor domestic violence unit for the state attorneys is held. Attorneys and judges are specially trained regarding the procedures and purpose for having this separate court system. That's very important for judges and attorneys to all understand why cases come into domestic violence court, why we see these same people coming in as both defendants and victims, and understanding that cycle of violence so we can hopefully break that cycle. We also have victim specialists at the state attorney's office that provide information regarding services to victims as soon as possible after the case enters the criminal realm. Our victim specialists, which I'll explain more in the next slide, work hand in hand with our resources throughout the community, such as CVAC with Yvonne. We also have a specialty drug and mental health court which understand that cycle of violence, because the goal is not to just deal with cases after they happened. The goal is always to stop that cycle of violence and working with members of the community to understanding how that cycle began and to stop it before it continues. So our victim specialists at the state attorney's office, we work as a referral-based agency. We do not provide the services specifically, but we work hand in hand with all of our community partners, including CVAC, to assist with relocation, emergency shelter, financial assistance, support groups and counseling, injunctions for protection assistance, pro bono attorney referrals, court accompaniment, and connections with local food banks. Again, this is very important to understand as community members in Miami. We are here to protect you and help you. Just because a case is criminal in nature doesn't mean we can't help refer to the other services available. Now I want to talk about the main part of my presentation, is the stages of the criminal justice system. So a lot of people understand if there is an issue or they are in danger, call 911. But what happens after that stage? Presuming an arrest is made, what happens immediately after arrest for a criminal case is the defendant goes to first appearance or bond court within the next 24 to 48 hours. At that bond court, a defendant is given pretrial release conditions. The majority of criminal cases, I'm speaking from misdemeanors, so anything that's punishable by less than a year in jail, but for the majority of criminal cases spanning wide variety, everyone is entitled to some pretrial release conditions. Do not expect when an abuser is arrested, that they will stay in custody during the pendency of the case, which is why it's always important to reach out to referrals immediately. However, with domestic violence cases, as a part of pretrial release conditions, a stay-away order is attached to a criminal defendant. What that means is that defendant, during the pendency of the case, while a stay-away order is in place, that defendant cannot go within 500 feet of the victim or have any third-party contacts with the victim. That means asking a family member or a friend to reach out on their behalf, or texting, calling, WhatsApp. Any contact with the victim is not allowed. If it is for a domestic violence case, a violation of a domestic violence stay-away order is a new criminal charge. So after first appearance court, a case, and I'm going to explain this, how the criminal justice system works outside of the COVID time period, and then I'll explain how it's working right now. Normally, what would happen next is our arraignment stage. At arraignment, a defendant either pleads guilty or not guilty. But during that time period between arrest and arraignment, the state attorney's office is investigating this case. This is a very important time for victims in the community and witnesses to domestic violence to keep in close contact with the state attorney's office. Keeping in close contact meaning providing officers at the time of arrest good phone numbers, good email addresses, good home addresses. Any contact is great contact. We need contact with our victims so we can continue these cases. A case does not just end at arrest. Once it hits the criminal justice system, we have to do our own independent investigation, and that includes reaching out to you, speaking to you, gathering more evidence, working hand in hand with the police department to make sure we can prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. Just because a crime happens doesn't mean we can necessarily prove it. We need to do our investigation and ensure every step of the investigation. So please never take offense when we're calling and asking specific questions or specific details of the encounter, because even if you've told the police, we also need to hear it, and we will have follow-up questions. It's not meant to embarrass or annoy. It's meant so we can prove our case, because the stronger our case is, the more we can go forward with our case, maybe reach a resolution pre-trial, and get services for both the victim and the defendant. So after arraignment, when charges are ideally filed, the case would then go to sounding and trial. A sounding is merely a date where both sides say, are you ready for trial or not? We generally reach out to all witnesses to a case and victims prior to that date to make sure, are you ready for trial? On trial day, will you be able to come to court? Will you be able to take that full day? Are you in Miami? Are you able to come? The idea behind sounding is to make sure we don't get to trial and we realize there are issues with the case. We want to make sure everything is as smooth as possible. We understand the criminal justice system isn't the quickest process, especially right now during the COVID age, but it is as efficient as we can possibly make it, and it is as efficient as our witnesses and victims help us to be as efficient as possible. Communication makes everything run smoothly. The final stage is trial. So a case can either resolve through a dismissal if we cannot prove our case, a plea, which is a resolution between the state and the defendant to resolve a charge, be it through jail, probation, which is a supervised release where they plead guilty, but then have to take classes. In domestic violence, there are statutorily mandated classes that have to be taken if someone takes a plea or is found guilty of a domestic violence charge. That includes 26 weeks of a batterer's intervention class. That is a very wide encompassing class that involves anger management. There are mental health evaluations and treatment if necessary, substance abuse evaluation and treatment if necessary, and a stay away order from the victim. Like I said, the goal of the criminal justice system, especially in domestic violence, is to break the cycle. It's not to punish one time, have everyone come out, and the cycle continue. We want to nip that cycle in the bud and try to understand why that cycle started and how we can end it. However, if a case does have to go to trial, at that trial, the victim most likely would have to take the stand and testify. We do have those victim specialists that I mentioned earlier that will sit with you in the trial if you'd like and give you as much comfort and hopefully the services prior to trial to make you feel as confident as possible with how that will go. The goal, as I always say, is never to annoy or embarrass a victim, but for the criminal justice system to succeed, victims and witnesses and officers all have to work hand in hand with the state attorney's office to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. Now explain how everything is going during the COVID era in this work from home environment. I'm happy to announce, and as Yvonne mentioned, our court system has been fully operational throughout this entire period. What that, and including the state attorney's office. What does that mean? So while the courts are closed physically, the courts are still open virtually. Immediately upon this COVID pandemic taking shape, the courts worked to convert most of our criminal justice hearings to Zoom. The Zoom platform allows us to have first appearance court, which is bond court, and any other hearings prior to a trial to make sure all of our cases are as prepared as possible. While trials are not currently happening, the state attorney's office is still reaching out to witnesses and victims right after cases happen to try to get their statements, to start the process, to provide services, referrals for services if necessary. And I just want to talk about a couple of the things the state attorney's office did during this COVID age to convert to this virtual platform. We have our Mobile Operations Victim Emergency Services, which is MOVES, is our acronym for it, which is working remotely. While they're not reporting to victims' residents, which they would do pre-COVID, they are reaching out immediately after a case occurs through our virtual platform of Life Size that we're generally using to speak with victims, to get their statements. As we know, statements are very important in criminal cases. The earlier we can get that statement, the better. The more details are remembered, everything is fresh. That is what our MOVES program does. They're still reaching out virtually through Zoom. We also have our Domestic Assistance Response Team, which is DART, which still reaches out, and our victim specialists, which still contact victims prior to first appearance. We want victims to feel as in touch with the criminal justice system and realize how transparent we will make it. We are not trying to hide the ball. We are explaining everything every step of the way. Our victim specialists and our DART team apprise victims of how bond works and explain to them what will happen after bond until the next stage. And if a victim wants to be present at that bond hearing, we will provide the Zoom link. We've also, as Yvonne mentioned, the state attorney, Ms. Rundle, has worked hand in hand to propose and have that legislation passed for this campaign to explain that we understand that during this COVID age, domestic violence should be on the rise. It was very concerning at the beginning of this pandemic when domestic violence numbers lowered, because as a community, we understand when things are closed and people are stuck inside with their abuser, we did fear that numbers would rise, especially with the triggers that normally lead to domestic violence of the economy, people losing their jobs, leading to more drug and alcohol abuse, which would lead to domestic violence. And I'd like to say, as Yvonne mentioned, that in April of 2020, we had approximately 508 total domestic violence arrests in Miami-Dade. In August, after all of these initiatives, we've had 611. Of course, it's not good that our numbers are rising, but it is good that people are reporting, starting the way to break the cycle of violence. And I believe that is all I have. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Daryl. That's so helpful. All righty then. Our next presenter is Sandra L. Brown, MA, CEO of the Institute for Relational Harm Reduction and Public Pathology Education. Sandra?
So I have worked the last 30-some years as a trauma therapist. And so I wanted to address a little bit about some of the impacts that trauma can present to safety issues during this critical time. Here we go. So the reason we're talking about trauma and its impact on domestic violence is that trauma in and of itself is not rare. And for instance, 49% of rape victims and 32% of physical assault victims go on to develop a trauma disorder. That could be something like acute stress, or kind of moving up the continuum of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex post-traumatic stress. And so as the state attorney was talking about, during times of crisis, those numbers can go up, like as we have seen in COVID, when victims are trapped in their homes and relationships because of the limitations of the pandemic. And even beyond domestic violence is that a lot of people can feel traumatized just even from this incident of COVID itself. And that's because trauma technically is generated from the feelings of fear and powerlessness. And so lots of people, I talked about this in the last workshop we did here, lots of people have fear and powerlessness, you know, from this, this instance of COVID. And so you could have, you know, trauma symptoms from COVID or DV or a combination of that. But the issue is that a vast majority of people with PTSD don't even know they have it. And especially if they haven't been reaching out to some of the really comprehensive wonderful services that Miami-Dade has. But if they haven't engaged in that process yet, they may not even know that they have PTSD. And the problem with that is that if they don't know they have it, they don't get help for it. And they don't consider what untreated PTSD can do when trying to leave domestic violence or going to court or child custody issues. And there is a very concernable issue related to that, especially as what we see in trauma. So since a portion of people with PTSD don't know they have it, they can't plan ahead for the assistance they might need because specifically of the PTSD, not just all the services of shelter care or those types of things, but they can't plan ahead for the assistance they might need because of the PTSD when they're involved in trying to safely and successfully leave domestic violence. And the issue is that PTSD is considered not only an emotional and psychological effect that most people understand it by, but also a neuro injury. And PTSD could have symptoms. A lot of people know about the typical PTSD symptoms like intrusive memories such as flashbacks, nightmares, physical or emotional distress when you're around things that represent the trauma. Some victims might have the symptom of avoidance, where they find themselves avoiding people, places, things, and events that represent the trauma or are connected to it. They try to avoid thinking and thoughts about the trauma. They could have hyperarousal or what we call hypervigilance. They are easily startled, always feeling like they're on guard, they can't sleep, have trouble concentrating, find high levels of irritability. They could have mood changes that come with traumas, such as hopelessness, memory problems, an inability to feel close to other people, feeling numb. So while all of those are distressing, especially to the victim, it is the neuro problem that survivors need to be aware of during and after trauma. And I think this is the piece that often gets missed unless they are already, you know, into trauma counseling, where a trauma therapist can intervene and explain this to them. So, there are neuro aspects that are connected to trauma, whether you have acute stress, PTSD, or complex PTSD. And there are some safety concerns, at least for trauma therapists, that we have about that. So whether or not you have untreated previous trauma, like from childhood or years ago, but it has remained largely untreated, or you have trauma from COVID, or you have trauma from DV, or you have multiple sources, it can interrupt your ability to plan safely, to either, if you have to stay in the environment for whatever reason, trauma can impact your ability and safety planning, leaving, handling court and custody issues, which is, you know, the whole reason to reach out for some of those services that Yvonne was talking about. And it's because trauma affects what's called the executive functioning system of the brain, and the short name for it is EF. And it's the EF system is really very, very important, especially in this critical time. And so that system of the brain that has been impacted by trauma, it definitely has, is responsible, for instance, for realistic assessment of your situation, concentration, planning, even the motivation to plan in leaving, the organization that it takes mentally, physically, in all realms in order to work towards that goal, time management, attention, it affects memory. And two areas that always concerns me is that it affects the ability to withhold responses, especially if you are in a situation where responding may increase the level of violence. Trauma can have an effect on the ability to withhold that response. And correspondingly, it can also affect error monitoring, which means knowing that you did something incorrectly and correcting it. So if you recognize, if your EF system was working and your error monitoring was working, if you did something like not withhold a response that led to an unsafe situation. Your error monitoring would say, don't do that. And so the EF system, when it is affected, can, greatly impact what a survivor does in the middle of that and what they do after that. All of those functioning in the executive functioning, the assessment and concentration, motivation, memory, attention, all of that, are all necessary functions and skill sets to stay safely, leave successfully, handle the aftermath of the domestic violence. And the issue is most survivors, unless they've gotten into counseling or and trauma treatment, don't recognize the problems with these functions. They just think I'm stressed, and that those skill sets will improve quickly. And when they don't recognize the problems with these functions, it's what increases, at least for us in trauma, the safety concerns, lethality risks, and unsuccessful leaving or court preparation. And it's what we call trauma mechanics. It's just how trauma works. There's been a lot less focus, I think, on sometimes working with domestic violence survivors about knowing and expecting to have some neuro impact, which is going to impact your decision making during a really critical time. So we could increase better outcomes if victims knew to anticipate problems with these neuro skill sets and get assistance during these critical time periods in the DV process. Not because you aren't strong enough, not because you aren't smart enough, but because trauma affects everyone's neuro condition, and we aren't at our highest functioning decision-making self when we are having a neuro impact from that. So get assistance. I can't say any more than what Yvonne has said with all of the great services you have there. Understand that you are not at your highest functionality from trauma, and just expecting that helps survivors to reach out to get assistance and avoid the pitfalls of executive functioning problems and judgment and planning and decision making and organizing. So I would rather you assume you have some level of neuro interference at this really critical time period, and to get help with even just right now in the very beginning parts of it, the decision making about what's really happening in the relationship. Outside judgment assistance about your safety, and leaving, get assistance with planning and organizing and what the next steps are going to be. You should get assistance with safety planning while you're still at home or in the relationship, or if you are having frequent contact with them. Get assistance with safety partners, those who know your situation and check in with you frequently, whether they're friends or family or other services. And for those wanting to leave, absolutely get assistance with exit coordination with shelters and law enforcement. It's you know, the most dangerous time period. Again, recognize that your highest functionality from trauma might not be where it needs to be in order to take next steps and make those decisions. Get assistance to legal resources and buy legal resources, and be assessed for trauma or trauma treatment, and domestic violence support services for you, for your children as well. So I think that it's important that survivors assume some level of neuro impact and get assistance, resources, and other input and planning for the safest and most successful outcome. And do tell your trauma therapist about any of those executive functioning symptoms that you are having, because trauma treatment now very much often will focus on sort of the neuro parts to get the brain, you know, up and going again. So be safe. Sounds like you have great resources in Miami-Dade. Wish I had them where we were at, in the middle, on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. So it's great that you have what you do have there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Carmen, are we ready to start the Q&A? Well, let me remind attendees to click on the Q&A button below and be sure to address your question to the panelist intended. Carmen?
Yes, we are.
All righty, please go ahead then.
Thank you so much. The first question is for Bureau Chief I apologize, Yvonne Mesa. And the question is, how can someone start a new life in a different state to escape their abuser? I know that you mentioned a little bit on this, but a follow-up is, what resources can be found and are available in different states?
Okay, so part of one of the things that has been created to help victims that are fleeing from one state to another, it's a coalition. Every single state of the United States has a coalition. So my first reaction would be to tell you to locate the coalition, because the coalition, normally these coalitions are very powerful. They're very well connected, and they have different names. Like here, for example, it's Florida. It used to be Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Now we're replacing that one by Florida Partnership to End Domestic Violence. But every state has a coalition. In addition to that, every state, depending upon the jurisdiction, also have shelters. So if you put shelter for battered women in, and you put the name of the state, you are going to have a list of all the shelters in that state. And I want to clarify the fact that shelters are not necessarily only for a bed. So if you're looking for services, definitely a shelter will be the perfect place to do that, because they're in the middle of the network of all the other services in that jurisdiction. So I will tell you again, to recap, find the coalition of your state, and also find the shelter in that jurisdiction.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I have a couple other questions, and this is, we're going to open it up to the whole panel. Just let me know who would care to answer the question first. I have a question that says, what happens if a victim decides after calling 911 and starts going through the process, decides to drop the charges and wants to go back to their abuser?
I can take that question.
Okay.
So a case, once a criminal case is started, so once the police make an arrest on somebody, the case is now the state of Florida versus the defendant. It is not victim versus defendant. It is not abused versus abuser. It is the state of Florida pursuing criminal charges against the defendant. It is very important to understand this because it is not someone trying to get back at somebody else. You shouldn't feel like you are hurting somebody. Once a criminal case is made and an arrest is made by police, it is not the victim going against the defendant. It is not the abused going against the abuser. It is the state of Florida. And once the case is created, the state of Florida has an obligation to fully investigate the case. Now, if a victim is uncooperative with us, we can't, there's sometimes we can't necessarily go forward on a case. However, we still have to do our due diligence, reach out to all officers involved, reach out to any other witnesses possibly involved. If there's surveillance, if there's any other evidence, the 911 calls, we look through all of our evidence, all of our investigation, and we then make a determination whether we can proceed and go forward with or without the victim. Of course, we always want cooperation with all witnesses, with all officers. We want to get all evidence. We want to get everything, but that's not always the case. And we are going to still prosecute cases if we believe and can prove beyond a reasonable doubt a crime occurred, if we can still prove that without the victim.
Thank you very much. Another question that has come in is, can you call somewhere or someone if you know a neighbor is the one that's going through domestic violence? Detective, I wonder if you would be so kind to answer this one.
You can always call 911 if you know of any law violations or anything you want to report. However, in domestic violence cases, we would need to speak with the victim to, get that information in detail so that we can start to build our case and hopefully make an arrest in that case.
So you do need cooperation from the actual victim?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question that's a little more detailed, and it says, how big is the shelter in Seabeck?
Okay. Okay, so yeah, CVAC is not a shelter. So CVAC is an outreach component. It's a non-residential component. But the shelters that we have 3 shelters right now for a total of 164 beds and 18 cribs. However, now in December, again, we're gonna be adding 60 beds to Miami-Dade County. So we will have, more than 200 beds available to victims in Miami-Dade County.
And how long can survivors stay in that facility or in the?
Sure. If we're talking about an emergency shelter, normally without COVID-19, normally would be from 6 to 8 weeks. That's normally across the country what emergency shelter entails. However, during COVID-19 times, we have extended their stay, and we have victims that unfortunately, due to the fact that they've lost their employment and that they have no other resources, they have really stayed with us for actually months now.
I have another one to follow up. Can injunctions for DV survivors cross counties?
Absolutely, they can. And cross state as well.
Oh, that's very good.
If you obtain an injunction of protection here in Miami-Dade County, that is an order for protection that can be enforced throughout the country, depending upon the full and credit statute that allows an injunction to be enforceable in other jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another one that has come in that says, I am a nurse practitioner. How can I help my patients who are living in unsafe relationships?
My opinion, I don't know if any of my other colleagues would like to jump in, but I think that the most effective way for us to help a victim is to be equipped ourselves with the information needed, because we have to recognize that we need to respect the victim's decision to come forward. I think that as advocates, sometimes we may cross the line because we feel that we know better than she does or he does, depending upon the victim, what they need. So at all times, we have to be very respectful of the decision-making powers of the victim. But as somebody else looking to a domestic violence situation, the best thing that we could do is have written material, pamphlets, to know the hotline, to know the numbers where you can connect this victim with.
Okay, thank you very much. Under what circumstances should you not call the police to come to the house at the time of the abuse? Detective, maybe?
Anytime you feel that you're in danger or you feel that some violence is occurring or any type of thing that is occurring, you should call 911. Don't hesitate. We'll get there. We'll respond. We'll help you figure it out, come up with the plan. But that's what we're for, to serve and protect. Call 911. We're there. We're available.
And we certainly appreciate your service and your protection, Detective. A follow-up on this is verbal abuse a crime, and can you call 911 for verbal abuse?
It depends what the verbal abuse is. It depends how the verbal abuse is made, if it's in person, if it's over the phone, if it's over text, depending on what the verbal abuse, well, text would be written abuse, but non-physical. It depends. There are different criminal statutes that would address certain things. So verbal abuse combined, if it's verbal abuse in the sense of a threat, for example, if you are threatening harm, but it's only verbal in nature, but there's the apparent ability to carry out that threat, and there's actions that don't amount to physical contact, but it could lead to a criminal charge of assault or aggravated assault. If it's verbal abuse that are threats or harassing contact over the phone, there are charges harassing phone calls. If you make written threats to do serious bodily harm through text or instant message, that could be a felony of written threats. There are many different intricacies of the law in both Florida and other places that could be a criminal offense depending on what it is. Our best advice, as the detective mentioned, if you believe that there is any criminal act or you believe that you are in an unsafe or dangerous environment, call the police. It never hurts to call the police.
So another question that has come, thank you very much, Attorney. Another question that has come in is, do we call 911 for stalking? And
Yes, stalking is a crime.
Stalking is a crime, okay?
Yes.
Another question that has come in is senior domestic violence handled differently?
Just to confirm, is that, I imagine that's a crime against an elderly person?
Yes.
So there are criminal statutes that make it, it's an enhancer in some situations. So if you commit a crime of battery, so an intentional touch or strike against someone's will, against someone the age of 65 or older, that would be a felony instead of a misdemeanor. It's an aggravator for assault as well. So the threat, if there's no physical contact, but you make a threat with the apparent ability to carry it out, it's an enhancer if the victim is above the age of 65.
And a follow-up to that, how about disabled survivors?
Yes, that's also an enhancer. So a battery on a disabled person would also enhance a battery from a misdemeanor to a felony.
Okay, thank you very much. where exactly can people get help, either group help or individual help at low cost or no cost in the Miami-Dade area in terms of mental health? Are there groups?
Definitely. One of the services that we offer at CVAC is we offer mental health services. One of our most relevant partners is the Trauma Resolution Center, and they're one of the co-located partners. So definitely all the services that we provide at the center are free of charge, and mental health is definitely one of the main ones. So by going to CVAC, they would have access to mental health free services.
Thank you very much. Follow up to that one, Bureau Chief. Are there groups for children, mental health groups for children?
Okay, so we at CVAC do not have any mental health group for children. We do have, since we provide mental health services, the therapist working with that victim may bring the children in to do family therapy, but we do not have groups per se for children.
So when you say family therapy, would the parents be present at therapy? Or is there a place in time that a child can speak on their own with someone with confidence that nothing's going to be divulged?
Yeah, well, in our case, since we are a domestic violence center, we only work with the parent that is the victim. We do not work, we don't bring in the party that has been accused of the violence. So, but we definitely work with the mom, and often when needed, the therapist may indicate that they want to work with the child, and they would do that. So that's something that we definitely do. There are other organizations in Miami-Dade County, such as the Mailman Center and many others that work more closely, like Christie House, that works with sexually abused children. For example, they have a mental health component. Citrus has a mental health component. So there are a lot of other agencies in Miami-Dade County that their services are more tailored to children than CVAC.
And would the same apply for teenagers?
Well, teenagers, we definitely, all the services that we provide are definitely available to teenagers. And we have had at certain times groups for teens, but never for children. But if a teenager is being attacked, is a victim of teen violence, we can certainly help them at CVAC, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. Couple of other groups that I would like to have addressed is the LGBTQ community. Are there groups for abuse for that community? And are there groups or therapy strictly in Spanish or Creole?
Yes, we provide services. We have most of our staff, it's very multilingual, lingual. We have services in Creole. We have a lot of Haitian employees in our division. And we do have a lot of Latino employees in our division as well. So many of our services, depending upon, again, I couldn't tell you which one of the 38 services are available in the other languages, because that would take a little more in-depth analysis. But since our staff is trilingual, and bilingual, most of them can be definitely performed, such as the support groups, for example, particularly about the support groups, depending upon the need, of the clients that we have at the time. Definitely we can and have provided support groups in Creole and support groups in Spanish. With regard to the LGBTQ community, we provide services to all members of our community. We have different partners in our community, such as the Yes Institute and Survivor's Pathway, that they have a special groups, special programming for the LGBTQ community. But we certainly can help that community regardless of them being a member of that community, because that would be something that would be irrelevant in terms of accessing the services that we have. But once we identify that a member of the LGBTQ community, for example, wants to seek further assistance, we will connect them to one of the two agencies that I previously mentioned, which are basically geared towards that specific community.
Thank you very much. To Sandra L. Brown, could you please speak on complex PTSD versus just PTSD?
The differences have to do with sometimes onset. Sometimes you will see complex PTSD with people who had earlier onset, like in childhood, aversive childhoods, or abuse, that kind of thing, and sometimes just untreated from early onset can be complex. A lot of times you will see childhood trauma coupled with, adult domestic violence or sexual assault or whatever. And so a lot of times complex is looked at as historical trauma that dates back quite a ways. Intensity and duration is usually what they look at.
Okay, thank you. And I have, just to follow up, I have another question for you. Is there ever a time when untreated complex PTSD creates permanent damage to the brain?
So I'm not, a neuroscience person. I've had neuroscience classes on trauma. I can only speak from my experience with my clients. I have seen significant neuro impairments from complex PTSD. A lot of times they get their trauma treatment, but they still have neuro issues. But our treatment is done. They may go on to, a neuropsychologist or something. So I don't always see the outcomes of what happens with their neuro impairment. There can be significant, and which is, the whole point about getting trauma treatment, as early as you can, because it increases the positive outcomes.
Could you speak a little bit about your program, Sandra?
We kind of work in a specific niche with sort of the survivors of the worst, survivors who are coming out of relationships with narcissists, antisocials, and psychopaths. So the relational dynamics sometimes are a little different. Their trauma, there's some atypical symptoms that aren't standard to PTSD. We have an online course program. Before COVID, we had in-person and intensives, retreats, that kind of thing. And books, helpful things for recovery.
Is there a particular book or books that you would recommend?
The DV shelters have used one particular book, a lot of mine, How to Spot the Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved. And then our latest has all of our research that we have done on survivors and their atypical trauma. And that book is called Women Who Love Psychopaths: Inside the Relationships of Inevitable Harm with Psychopaths, Sociopaths, and Narcissists.
Okay, thank you very much. And possibly to you, follow up, where would a person find a trauma therapist not related to DV, but related to other issues?
If they are in the United States, emdr.com, I think it is, or emdr.org. There is find a clinician, and you put in your zip code, and it will pull up EMDR therapists, and EMDR therapists are trauma therapists.
And this is for everyone involved. We have a question of someone from Miami-Dade who is asking, how can we get involved and help the community? I'm sure there are always opportunities for the community to help within these programs. Would anyone like to comment on this?
Yes, I can. We definitely have a lot of different opportunities for anyone who would like to get involved. I would recommend that they call CVAC. We have a protocol that we follow for any volunteers, and so a training that they need to take. But definitely plenty of opportunities in the shelter, in CVAC, in the transitional housing programs. We also have an educational committee that basically we go out to the community, hospitals, schools, to educate people, to raise awareness. So there's plenty of opportunities. Anyone who would like to join our cause, they can call 305-285-5900. And again, let me repeat the number, 305-285-5900, and we will be able to talk to you, interview you, put you through the training, and make you a part of our team.
Thank you, Bureau Chief Mesa.
Thank you.
Sandra, to get back to you, I have a person who says, your work is amazing. Your understanding of narcissists is so helpful in helping abuse victims. Would you be so kind as to mention the names of your books once again, please?
How to Spot a Dangerous Man, book and workbook. Counseling Victims of Violence, which is a desktop reference book for therapists. Women Who Love Psychopaths.
And where can these books be accessed?
Amazon, and our website, which is saferelationshipsmagazine.com.
Would you repeat that one for us once again, please?
saferelationshipsmagazine.com.
And you can also find a lot of our featured book lists on our website at powerandconnection.org. I have shared in our chat so everyone can visit our featured book list, and all of Sandra's book is also on there, along with other books that you can check out with our partners, Books and Books.
Let's see, and Sandra, to follow up with you, what are the most important qualifications to look for in a mental health care provider who treats domestic abuse?
Well, twofold. Of course, they need training in victimology, domestic violence, and I just don't ever refer any domestic violence people to someone who's not a trauma therapist, because the percentage, is so high. So we might as well get them to, the right person the first time out. So I would say, make sure that the therapists are trained, in domestic violence and trauma certification.
Okay, thank you so much. And for a final question, I have give me just one moment here. Something just came in. Do some police get personally involved sometimes with a DV case?
Well, I would think, you would be professional at all times. We would get them to the right services and make the right referrals. But as far as personally, what do you mean by personal?
In other words, do they follow up? I would assume that that's what the question means. Would they follow up with that family? Do they stay in touch with the family?
The domestic cases that if an arrest is not made, that on scene with the uniformed patrol officers, the cases are referred to a domestic violence detective. So detectives, yes, we do keep in contact with the victims. Like Daryl stated, we reach out with the state attorney, work with them, with the court system. So it's an ongoing process. We're all in it together and we go through it step by step.
Thank you very much. Kyle, back to you. We have had some great answers. So I really appreciate it. Back to you, Kyle.
All righty, we're wrapping up then. Thank you to all our esteemed panelists and to all our new friends. This webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to share it with as many people as you can. I'm sure you can see the value of this important information. The link will be provided to you in an email as soon as it's ready. You will receive a brief survey, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. You will also receive the book list of selected recommendations by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We are very grateful to CVAC, to the Miami-Dade Police Department, and the State Attorney's Office for their participation. Thank you to the Arts and Business Council in Miami and to Books and Books for their continued partnerships. We hope you will join us after the holidays for our January, February, and March programs. You may learn more and register for those programs right now on our website, powerinconnection.org. Everyone, take care and be safe. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.